Hi, friends. I am so glad that you're here with me today. I have walked with you for the last 12 weeks, the books of the Bible and what is in the Bible. We are still on the Old Testament. So since it's been so long, I'm going to wrap up the Old Testament and we're going to really talk about the book of Daniel. Have you heard of any stories about Daniel? One that pops into my head is Daniel in the lion's den. Do you remember that story? Why would somebody be in a den of lions? Let's find out.
The next book is Daniel. Dr. Schniff, where's Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel's work as a prophet covers a very long time, from 605 BC until 536 BC, about 70 years.
Daniel was a very impressive young man who was taken away to Babylon in 605 BC and spent his whole life living and working in the royal court. It isn't a long book with only 12 chapters, but it covers a lot of history and some really great stories. The first 6 chapters tell stories of the lives of Daniel and 3 of his Jewish friends named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? I've heard of those guys.
Are they the ones with the fiery furnace?
They sure are. King Nebuchadnezzar built a giant idol and told everyone to bow to it. The 3 boys wouldn't bow to a fake god because that was against God's law. So they were thrown into a fiery furnace to burn up. But they didn't burn up. God saved them and they walked out just fine.
I love that story. What else is in Daniel?
God helped Daniel explain King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, just like he'd helped Joseph explain Pharaoh's dream 1,000 years earlier. Later on, when King Belshazzar, the very last king of Babylon, was having a huge feast in his palace, a hand appeared in midair and wrote a message on the wall. They were terrified, and they couldn't figure out what it said. Finally, they called in Daniel, who told them the message said Belshazzar's reign as king was ending. And that very night, Belshazzar was killed, and the Persians and Medes took over Babylon.
Is that where the saying, "I've seen the writing on the wall" comes from?
Yep, the book of Daniel.
Isn't there a story about Daniel and some, tigers?
I think you mean lions.
Oh, lions?
There sure is. After the Persians and Medes took over, a Mede king named Darius made Daniel his most trusted advisor. The king's other advisors got jealous and had the king pass a law that said no one could pray to anyone except the king. When they caught Daniel praying to his god, Daniel was thrown into a den of lions.
But God shut the lions' mouths and Daniel came out just fine. Right? Am I right?
I think you're right. So that's just the first 6 chapters of Daniel? Wow. What's in the second half?
Chapter 7 talks about a son of man coming to bring God's kingdom. That comes up in the New Testament a lot. Then there are some really crazy visions about the future, prophecies about the kings and kingdoms that would follow the Persians and Medes, told with symbols, strange creatures with 10 horns, or 4 wings, or 4 heads. Really wild stuff.
And most of what Daniel prophesied about future kings and kingdoms came true in the 400 years after Daniel had his visions. It's amazing.
And that's Daniel, the last of the major prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and then Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. Without hesitation comes Hosea, Joel, and Amos. Then Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah. Then just 3 more tiny little guys, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi.
These are the prophets, there ain't none finer. They're in 2 sections called the major and the minor. They bring God's messages, each called an oracle. Divvy 'em up into buckets categorical.
Indictment, judgment, instruction, aftermath, bright future if you're walking on a godly path.
Being God's prophet could wear you out quick. From sleeping with the lions to staring Reading about the prophets prophesying to the government teaches us important stuff about the new covenant.
And how the Messiah's gonna pay for our crime. Let's go through the list one more time. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and then Lamentations. Ezekiel, Daniel, without hesitation comes Hosea, Joel, and Amos. Then Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah. Then just three more tiny little guys, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi.
They're in two sections called the major and the minor.
Well, we are faced with another story about bravery. Daniel had to be really brave. He had to be brave to stand up to a king. He had to be brave to go with the lions. But Daniel knew what? Just what I've been talking about. That we know that God is with us in our hearts. And if we talk to God, God can be there for us and help us find ways to solve our problems. Well, I thought of a fun game that you could teach somebody. Have you ever played rock, paper, scissors? Well, that is a fun game in our house, but I thought I'd change it up. Let's play Daniel, Ruler, and Lion. Daniel was the one that talked to God, so instead of paper or scissors, you could do Daniel. And then we have Ruler, because our ruler, our king, was not a nice guy, and he was really putting his fist down. And then we have Lion. We have Daniel, Ruler, Lion. So Ruler beats Daniel, Daniel beats Lion, and Lion beats Ruler. Does that make sense? It's kind of tricky. See if you can teach somebody the new game of rock, paper, scissors. Daniel, Ruler, Lion. Daniel, Ruler, Lion. All right, my friends, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next week where we talk about the New Testament. Who's our new character in the New Testament? Jesus. Jesus is born. Jesus teaches us all of the good news that God has to share with us. See you next week.